The dance of self-deception, curiosity, and insight. How active inference shapes who we are. Ever wondered how your brain juggles who you think you are, how curious you feel, and how honest you are with yourself? Welcome to the fascinating world of active inference, a framework that explains how our minds predict, adapt, and sometimes deceive themselves to stay in balance. Let's dive into how self-deception, curiosity, and insight interact through the lenses of narrative identity, mental action, and the brain's need for stability. Active inference, the brain's prediction game. At its core, your brain is a prediction machine. It uses a process called active inference to make sense of the world by minimizing surprises, aka prediction errors. Everything, from your choices to your sense of self, is part of this ongoing effort to stay one step ahead. But how does this work? Enter the partially observable Markov decision process, POMDP, a fancy way to describe how your brain guesses at hidden factors, like your intentions or external causes, based on the limited information it gets from the senses. Think of it like navigating a foggy road. Your brain constantly updates its guesses and picks actions to either explore new paths or exploit familiar ones. The secret sauce? Precision. This is how much trust your brain places in its predictions versus incoming data. The role of narratives, your brain's identity toolkit. Your sense of identity, your narrative self, is essentially a story your brain creates to keep things running smoothly. It's a mental shortcut to minimize prediction errors, offering a stable framework for interpreting your experiences. Event segmentation. Your brain chunks life into episodes, giving your story structure. Future projections. It predicts outcomes based on your narrative. For example, I've handled worse, I'll be fine. Cultural narratives. Your brain borrows societal scripts to guide social behavior like hard work pays off. This stabilizing process is called autopoiesis, a fancy term meaning self-maintenance. Your brain uses narratives to keep your identity intact, even when the facts don't fully add up. This is where self-deception sneaks in. Self-deception, when your brain plays tricks on you. Self-deception isn't just denial, it's your brain tweaking precision to protect your narrative. Here's how it works. Rejecting evidence. Ignoring data that doesn't fit your story. For example, dismissing a critique as irrelevant. Reframing evidence. Spinning ambiguous facts to support your narrative. For example, interpreting neutral feedback as praise. Pseudo-rationalizing. Adjusting beliefs to maintain your self-image. For example, I'm not bad at math, grades just don't show intelligence. Picture an overconfident leader. Their brain prioritizes their narrative, I'm infallible, ignoring team warnings and suppressing anxiety. This works short-term, but can backfire when reality catches up, like a failed project. Curiosity and insight. Breaking the cycle. Self-deception isn't the whole story. Sometimes our brains crave novelty and insight, the moments when we challenge old beliefs and grow. This happens when curiosity takes the wheel. Curiosity. Your brain actively seeks new information to reduce uncertainty. Think of a child exploring a new toy or an adult pondering what-if scenarios. Insight. When prediction errors overwhelm old beliefs, your brain reconfigures its narrative. This aha moment can feel transformative, like realizing a long-held assumption was wrong. But it's all about balance. Too much narrative rigidity, exploitation, leads to stagnation, while too much openness, exploration, risks identity chaos. The tug of war, exploration versus exploitation. Your brain has to walk a fine line. Exploitation, sticking to your current narrative for efficiency. Exploration, revising your story to adapt to new evidence. For example, someone clinging to a resilient self-view may ignore signs of burnout, while someone overly focused on exploring might struggle with a fragmented sense of self. This balance is key to maintaining allostasis, your brain's way of anticipating and meeting your needs to stay stable. When things go wrong, precision and mental health. Sometimes, the brain's precision system goes haywire, leading to mental health challenges. Depression, overconfidence in negative self-narratives, I'm worthless. Blocks positive updates. Anxiety, Low confidence in predictions amplifies uncertainty, fueling hypervigilance. Understanding these dynamics offers fresh insights into treating disorders and even designing artificial intelligence systems that avoid self-deceptive loops. Big picture, why this matters. In the end, your brain is a master of storytelling and adaptation, whether it's constructing your identity, exploring the unknown, or deceiving itself to avoid discom.
Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we are going to be going over something that I think is incredibly fascinating, and that's the connection between self-deception, curiosity, and those like aha moments of insight.
Yeah.
And to help us understand all that, we're going to be using the lens of active inference.
Right.
So, you've probably experienced that feeling of just like holding on to a belief, even when you have evidence that like points to the contrary.
Yeah.
Or maybe you've had like a sudden shift in perspective that just like completely changes your understanding of something.
Absolutely.
And we're going to unpack like the mechanisms behind these experiences using a research article on active inference and narrative identity as our guide today.
It's really amazing to think about how our brains are constantly generating these predictions about the world.
Yeah.
And when those predictions don't actually line up with reality, we have a choice to make.
Right.
We can either update our beliefs or we can stick to our guns and try to explain away the discrepancies.
Oh, that's such a good point. It's like our brains are constantly running these like little simulations trying to anticipate what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
And sometimes to avoid the discomfort of being wrong, we kind of twist the narrative to fit our existing beliefs.
Exactly. And, the research article actually uses this framework called partially observable Markov decision processes, or POMDPs for short,
Okay.
to explain how our brains navigate this uncertainty.
Okay.
Think about a time when you made a decision based on incomplete information.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you were choosing a route to work knowing there might be traffic,
Right.
or deciding whether to trust someone based on just a couple of interactions.
Yeah.
In those moments, your brain is essentially acting like a POMDP.
Yeah.
It's weighing your beliefs against what you can actually observe and trying to make the best choice possible.
Okay. So that's PRMDPs, but how does precision weighting fit into all of this? The article mentions that quite a bit.
Precision weighting is basically like a volume knob for our beliefs.
Hmm.
It determines how much emphasis our brain puts on either our existing beliefs or the new information coming in from our senses.
So it's like deciding how much we're going to listen to new information versus how much we're going to stick with what we already think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, imagine you believe you're a fantastic musician,
Oh.
but you completely bomb an audition.
Oof.
If you have high precision on that prior belief that I'm a great musician,
Yeah.
you might try to explain it away.
Right.
Maybe blame the judges or the instrument, anything but your own performance.
Right.
Basically, you're turning down the volume on that sensory data that's coming in.
The actual sound of your playing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's conflicting with your cherished belief.
But if you really listen to that feedback and you turn up the volume on that sensory data, you might be forced to update that belief.
Absolutely.
And you might realize, okay, maybe I'm talented, but I still have some room for improvement.
Yeah.
And that realization, although it might be a little uncomfortable, could actually help you grow as a musician.
Absolutely.
Mm.
It's all about finding that balance between sticking with what we know
Right.
and being open to new information that might challenge our beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And this tension isn't just limited to our skills or abilities. It also plays a huge role in shaping our narrative identity.
Oh?
That story we create about who we are, our values, and our place in the world.
That story we tell ourselves about ourselves.
Exactly.
So we create this narrative identity, this story about who we are. But what happens when our story starts to clash with reality? Like, what happens when we have experiences that don't really fit into that self-narrative?
I think that's where self-deception comes in.
Okay.
When our self-model becomes too rigid, we kind of manipulate that precision weighting to protect our cherished beliefs,
Right.
even if they don't perfectly align with reality.
It's like clinging to a familiar map, even when we've totally veered off course.
Exactly.
I've definitely been there. It's like almost our ego trying to protect itself by filtering out information that might challenge our sense of self.
Right.
But wouldn't that prevent us from like learning and growing?
Right. It definitely can. And the research article gives this great example of the infallible leader
Okay.
who has such high precision on their belief that they're always right, that they dismiss any contradictory evidence from their team.
Wow.
And that can lead to making some pretty poor decisions because they're not really adapting to the changing circumstances.
That makes me think about how this plays out in like the real world, not just with individuals, but with like entire groups or even societies.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed how certain groups can get so entrenched in their own narratives that they become resistant to any new information that challenges that worldview?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Shared narratives, whether they're like cultural myths or political ideologies, can act like a collective form of self-deception.
Right.
They can bind groups together,
Mhm.
but they can also blind them to alternative perspectives or maybe even some inconvenient truths.
It's like we're all susceptible to this, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah.
Our brains are wired to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs and to filter out anything that might disrupt that sense of self.
Right. But if we get stuck in that loop, how do we break free?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. How do we cultivate more curiosity and insight?
Well, curiosity is like our brain's built-in drive to explore,
Okay.
to kind of fill in those gaps in our knowledge. It pushes us to ask questions, to seek out new experiences, and to really challenge our assumptions.
It's like that feeling of just wanting to know more, to delve deeper into something that really intrigues us.
Exactly.
I think back to when I was a kid, I was constantly asking why about everything.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the way, it feels like we lose some of that innate curiosity.
Maybe we become more focused on maintaining our existing knowledge base
Okay.
and less willing to venture into the unknown.
Right.
But nurturing that curiosity is absolutely crucial because it often leads to those aha moments of insight, those
Yeah.
sudden shifts in perspective that completely reconfigure our understanding.
I love those moments. They're like mini revelations that change the way we see the world.
Is that what the research article is referring to when it talks about allostasis and autopoiesis?
Exactly. So allostasis is our brain's way of anticipating and meeting our needs,
Yeah.
even before they arise. It's like a predictive maintenance system
Gotcha.
that keeps us in this state of balance.
Yeah.
And our narrative identity actually plays a really crucial role in this process.
So our self model isn't just like a story we tell ourselves.
Mhm.
It's like a blueprint for how we navigate the world, anticipating challenges and regulating our internal state.
Exactly.
Wow.
And autopoiesis refers to the way systems, whether it's living organisms or organizations, maintain their stability and coherence over time.
Okay.
Think about it like this. Your self-model is constantly working to maintain its own stability, even if that means filtering out information that might challenge it.
That's fascinating. So it's like our brains are constantly working to maintain this sense of equilibrium, both internally and in our interactions with the world.
Yeah.
But if we're not careful, that drive for stability can lead to rigidity and self-deception. So how do we strike that balance? How do we maintain that stable sense of self while still being open to new information and growth? It's like we need to be both rooted and flexible at the same time.
It really is a delicate dance.
Yeah.
But I think the key lies in cultivating those qualities that help us break free from those rigid narratives.
Okay.
Qualities like curiosity and insight.
You've mentioned curiosity before, but what are some practical ways that we can actually cultivate more of it in our lives?
Well, one powerful strategy is to actively seek out diverse perspectives. Surround yourself with people who are going to challenge your assumptions, introduce you to new ideas, and help you see the world through different lenses.
That reminds me of a time when I intentionally started following people on social media who had very different viewpoints than my own. It was definitely uncomfortable at times, but it forced me to examine my own beliefs a lot more critically
Right.
and to actually consider alternative perspectives.
Exactly. It's about stepping outside of our echo chambers and exposing ourselves to different ways of thinking. And don't be afraid to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of them. Curiosity thrives on questions.
Right.
When you encounter something that challenges your beliefs, don't just dismiss it.
Yeah.
Get curious. Ask yourself, why do I believe this? What evidence supports this view? Are there other possible explanations?
It's like turning a critical eye on our own internal narratives.
Yeah,
Becoming more aware of the stories we're telling ourselves.
exactly.
But sometimes, even when we're presented with evidence that contradicts our beliefs, it can be really hard to let go. Why is that?
Our brains are wired to seek out patterns and to create a sense of coherence, even if that means clinging to beliefs that are no longer serving us.
Hmm.
Think of it like this. Imagine clinging to a false belief, like a shipwreck survivor clinging to a piece of driftwood.
Okay.
It might feel like security in the moment, but it's ultimately preventing you from reaching the shore.
That's such a powerful analogy. So how do we loosen our grip on that driftwood? How do we cultivate more of those aha moments of insight that can help us see things in a new light?
Those moments of insight often arise when we're willing to embrace discomfort.
Yeah.
to lean into that uncertainty that comes with challenging our own perspectives.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a significant emotional event, like a personal loss or a major setback, to shake us out of those habitual patterns of thinking.
It's like we need a certain level of emotional intensity
Right.
to break through those deeply ingrained narratives. Are there any gentler ways to cultivate insight, though?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Practices like mindfulness meditation can help us become more aware of our thoughts and feelings without judgment.
Okay.
And that can create space for new insights to emerge.
Mm.
And even engaging in creative activities,
Mm-hmm.
like writing, painting, or playing music, can also help us tap into those intuitive right brain modes of thinking that are often the source of breakthroughs.
So it's about finding ways to disrupt our routine patterns of thinking,
Yeah,
to create those moments of pause where new connections can be made.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
about cultivating a mindset of openness and curiosity, a willingness to explore the unknown and to embrace the possibility of being wrong.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It's made me realize how much our narratives shape our experience of the world
Yeah.
and how important it is to be aware of those narratives and to be willing to challenge them.
It's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
It's not about achieving some perfect state of enlightenment, but it's about cultivating this lifelong practice of self-reflection, curiosity, and openness to new perspectives.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. I think our listeners are going to find this conversation incredibly valuable.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to explore these ideas further. Until next time, keep those minds open and keep diving deep.